You'd think we had enough drama today, but no, there's this nonsense about Peter Kyle's remark about Farage. And I want to go through that. I want to discuss what I think is one of the more grotesque and counterproductive moments in recent British political debate. And it came predictably not from the Treasury or the Foreign Office, but from the chronic sanctuary of mediocrity and incoherence, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, now awkwardly rebranded under the Science and Technology umbrella. There's nothing scientific, and there's very little that is of technological advantage that is on display. At its helm is Peter Kyle, a man often lauded for competence in other policy areas, and he probably should get back to those. This week, he made what must be one of the most disgraceful interventions heard from a British cabinet minister in recent memory, and he accused Nigel Farage of being on the side of Jimmy Savile for opposing the Online Safety Bill, or Safety Act. Let's unpack what happened, what it reveals about the state of political discourse, and why this matters beyond the personalities involved. Appearing on Sky News, Peter Kyle responded to Reform UK's announcement that it would repeal the Online Safety Act, and he said, and I quote, "If people like Jimmy Savile were alive today, he'd be perpetrating his crimes online, and Nigel Farage is saying he's on their side." And when pressed by the interviewer to clarify, Kyle could have retreated, he could have pulled back. Instead, he doubled down. He added, "Nigel Farage is on the side of turning the clock back to the time when strange adults can get in touch via messaging apps with children." There was no misstatement, no slip. This was a deliberate rhetorical escalation that equated opposition to a particular piece of legislation with siding with one of the UK's most reviled abusers. And the problem here isn't just moral repugnance, though that is certainly present. It's a political cowardice dressed up as moral outrage. Kyle didn't engage with Farage's arguments about VMP loopholes, censorship risks or overreach. Instead, he reached for a lazy slur, implicitly smearing not only Farage but anyone concerned about the unintended consequences of the law. This is a tactic borrowed straight from the Boris Johnson playbook. Let's not forget Johnson's infamous 2022 jibe about Keir Starmer and Savile, a desperate diversion that ended up with the resignation of his own policy chief, Munira Mirza, in disgust. Kyle's comments were even worse. Unlike Johnson's implication about institutional failure under Starmer's watch, Kyle's comments suggest that disagreeing with government regulation is tantamount to endorsing predatory behaviour. The Act itself is flawed. Poorly drafted initially under Nadine Dorries, later carried forward by a string of incompetence, ending with Lisa Nandy, and now defended with zeal by Kyle, it imposes obligations that even Ofcom admits may not work. VPN usage has surged. Platforms like Twitter have censored parliamentary clips. Serious concerns have been raised by cybersecurity experts and civil libertarians, and Farage, for all his bluster, has raised a valid point, that pushing children to use VPNs may make them less safe, and that censorship powers in the Act are overly broad. Rather than answer this, Kyle has resorted to hysteria. And what has that achieved? Kyle has allowed Farage to play the victim, a role he wears with aplomb. He's energised Reform UK's base and distracted from Farage's lack of a coherent alternative. It is politically self-harming. Moreover, it degrades our public discourse. It insults victims of Savile's abuse by trivialising their suffering for political point scoring, and it corrodes trust in ministers who are meant to rise above this kind of bile. To say such a thing on national television, then to refuse to apologise, is not strength. It's evidence of a government so rattled by reform's momentum that it lashes out rather than governs. And this moment should be a wake-up call. We should insist on higher standards, not just of policy, but of language, civility and respect. The Online Safety Act deserves scrutiny, proper scrutiny. It deserves revision, if not repeal, and Reform UK deserves interrogation, but comparing critics to Jimmy Savile is beneath contempt. Peter Kyle should apologise, and if he will not, then Keir Starmer must distance himself or risk being complicit in one of the most disgraceful episodes of the year. In politics, as in life, how you argue matters as much as what you argue for, and on this occasion Peter Kyle has failed both tests.